Star Trek, which is why I hate bad Star Trek. And welcome to episode 100 of POS TOS! Are you applauding out there? I can't hear the applauding. I have to hope you're applauding, or else this is very, very, very sad. Well, anyway, we laid down the challenge and you accepted it. Now it's time for the voters' top picks of the best Star Trek of all time. Number 10, a three-way tie. I know, it's a cheat, so this is really the top 12 episodes of Star Trek, but still. Number 10 is a three-way tie nonetheless. Course Oblivion, where no man has gone before, Improbable Cause / The Die Is Cast. Let's go with the original series and just do these in chronological order, where no man has gone before. The second pilot episode of Star Trek, and the first Kirk episode, as well as Sulu.
And the rest.
The Enterprise, trying to cross a new boundary, encounters a force that activates the latent psychic powers in two of their crewmen. One of these is Kirk's best friend, Gary... something or other. What was it?
Mitchell.
That's it. As Gary loses more and more of his humanity to his impending godhood, Kirk ends up having to oppose his friend and finally kill him.
Does the rolling help?
It helps.
Personally, I found this an okay episode. Certainly Star Trek got better than this, but not a bad start overall. But it's not what I would have called number 10. Still, this isn't my vote. Also, Improbable Cause and The Die Is Cast on Deep Space Nine. I did almost put these on my top 10 list. It's only because there was great competition for the other spots of the top 10 list. This is a great mystery about someone bombed Garrick's shop and he gets sucked into greater and greater events along with Odo until soon they're dealing with one of the biggest major moments of the entire series up to that point, which will have reverberations all throughout the rest of the series. Like I said, this is an excellent episode. Definitely worth watching. Absolutely. In quality of the episode, this is definitely right up there.
3D!
And then there's the oddest of these three episodes, Course Oblivion, an episode where really we barely encounter our heroes at all in a sense.
It's an intriguing little follow-up to an odd prior episode of Voyager.
That episode was Demon. Not a particularly good episode, but this is a big improvement on it with a rather tragic ending.
I think this says something about Voyager, that our fans voted into the number 10 slot a Voyager episode that has very little of the actual Voyager crew.
Basically, the Voyager crew are starting to melt alive, and they don't know why. And in their desperate search, they find out a very dark fact about themselves that no one expected. And not the least of which because this is continuity from a previous episode. What do these episodes have in common besides being tied for 10th place? Well, either they're melting, or they're not melting, or they have silver eyes.
That's it. That's the connection.
Number 9. What You Leave Behind. The last Deep Space Nine episode. The wrap-up to the Dominion War, the Power Raids, Cisco, Dukat, Wynn. All of this stuff in one giant package. And it's a pretty good one. It's probably my pick for the best finale of all of Star Trek. Granted, it's got its flaws.
For example, the complete absence of Jadzia in any of these montages.
Behind the scenes is because Terry Farrell complained because they used some of her footage earlier in the season, which kind of ruined them using her footage now. I guess you get to steal it once and that's all. Which makes for the hilarious idea that Worf's fond remembrances of his time on Deep Space Nine include... although to Worf, this could be a fond remembrance.
Memories, like the corners of my mind.
'cause I'm killing Chancellor Gowron. Also, I have to admit, I was not a big fan of the final Dukat win Power Wraith story arc in general, so I really wasn't that invested in its follow-up in this episode. But I do gotta say, for what they gave and what they had to deal with, I think they handled this pretty well. I just really wish it hadn't come down to almost a comic book struggle between good and evil, with as complicated and gray as the morality was. I would have rather seen some sort of a character display, but then we already got that back in Waltz, where Dukat should have died. And I would have liked this to have been another sort of villainy. Perhaps the return of Minister Jaro, for example. I still say the Circle making a resurgence at the beginning of Season 7 would have made more sense than the Cult of the Power Wraiths. The first half of this episode was pretty much perfect in my eyes, with a great wrap-up to Major Kira, Damar, Garrick, Odo, the war.
It's got its flaws, but what you leave behind is a fairly pretty bow to tie up the excellent fan package that is DS9.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Number 8. In a Mirror Darkly. This will make my top 10 list for Enterprise, I promise you that. This is the two-parter near the end of Enterprise's run, where they decided to do what had never been done in all of Star Trek, and what they probably wouldn't get another chance to do, set an entire episode, 2 entire episodes actually, in the Mirror Universe. Also a chance to tie directly to the continuity of an original series episode in a way that only fans would really recognize. That is, the Tholian Web, and the Defiant, another starship similar to the Enterprise, that vanished, only to find out it actually went back 100 years into the Mirror Universe. A very clever way to answer a question that we weren't really asking, but still, the opening is there.
About the worst thing that I can say about this episode is that it's cheesy, silly, and well over the top.
But that's the Mirror Universe.
Exactly. It's great fun and good continuity to boot.
2 things that were very lacking in Enterprise generally. Yeah, I will admit some of the villainy is quite stupid.
Clearly, the Mirror Universe runs on neither lawful evil nor chaotic evil, but stupid evil.
And I believe it was the actual producer of the show who said, this episode puts the Ho back in Hoshi. In a Mirror Darkly, an Enterprise episode that for once actually earns this music. Number 7. The Doomsday Machine. I covered this episode already, and like I said there, it would have made my top 10 list, much like the Deep Space Nine episode previously, but there was just more competition ahead of it. Not because of any real faults other than this guy.
Right out of hell, I saw it.
I just can't get by this guy's performance. It's just this moment, really. It's not even his whole performance, just that bit. And
Don't you think I know that? There was, but not anymore.
And that. Maybe that too.
You're bluffing. Vulcans never bluff.
Still, it's a great episode. But this was voted specifically to look at the remastered effects, because a while back there was sort of a renaissance of the TOS Special Edition. But there were no remastered dance sequences, or mysterious rings, or Jabba the Hutt scenes.
Who the hell is the smirking little douchebag?
No, these were just improved special effects that very cleverly looked like the original series quality, just if the original series had had CG to work with. And for the most part, these were great improvements. And this episode was the first one they put out, and it's probably the best example. Check out some of these variations. Now that's what takes an already great episode and makes it even better. And this episode relied on a lot of space combat, so this was a very fitting episode to start with for its special edition.
The bones of the episode were always good, but a modern audience may not have the patience for some of the cheesy old school special effects. So this takes excellent old wine and puts it in a shiny new HD bottle.
The Doomsday Machine. So nice, they made it twice. And Jar Jar never appears.
Don't you think I know that?
6. Yesterday's Enterprise. Yeah, another one that already made my list, but that's not too surprising. This was Tasha's real send-off. This was just an excellent episode that showed what might have been, kind of hinted at what would be with the Dominion. It was like one of the high water marks for all of Star Trek, which is interesting that many of Star Trek's high water marks are stories that never were. It's almost like we have to explore the apocalyptic consequences of things, but we don't want to have that be business as usual until Deep Space Nine came along. So we'll have our cake and eat it too. We'll go dark and serious, kill off major characters, and then we just will say, oh, well, that never really happened, but we still got to see what could have happened.
Even though this is a very dark, intense episode, you still get to take time for some quieter character moments. Still intense, but not loud.
In some ways, this really does almost feel like a Deep Space Nine era story on the Enterprise D.
Now granted, some of the places that yesterday's Enterprise ended up going to be used in later episodes were lame, but you can't fault this episode for that.
You're ruining yesterday's Enterprise!
Who's that dude?
The episode!
Yes, we are ruining that.
5. In the Pale Moonlight. Well, duh. I'd be embarrassed if this wasn't on the list. I'm surprised it's as low as it is, but hey, this isn't my list. One of the best episodes of all Star Trek. My pick for best DS9 of all time. Probably the second best episode of Star Trek in all time.
It was my pick for the top slot.
Yes, Offscreen Kim was one of the voters. This is all about Sisko trying to get the Romulans to drop their neutral status and join the Federation and Klingon alliance in fighting against the Dominion. This is not really just a story of how that happened as much as the depths to which Sisko had to sink, bit by bit by bit by bit, drawing further and further into immorality and evil for the sake of stopping a greater evil. Is it worth it in the end? Well, Sisko says absolutely.
And if I had to do it all over again, I would.
And when you see the defeat of the Dominion that comes at the hands, at least largely, if not completely, by the Romulan interference, yeah, it's hard to judge. This is an episode that really, in the end, says the ends do justify the means. But that doesn't mean that it's okay. It just means
I can live with it.
In a way, it ends up rejecting Roddenberry's perfect vision, but it rings so true that for many fans, it's an excellent litmus test of what sort of Trek fan you are, whether or not you like In the Pale Moonlight.
Every man has his price.
I think I'm going to do the same thing again. Let's just play a funny bit.
This music and dance basically say, it's hilarious that I farted. And I'm doing it again!